I knew something was off the moment my screen froze mid-query and the office lights flickered, just for a second, like the building was exhaling some toxic secret it had been holding in too long. It was 7:48 a.m. Too early for ghost stories, too late for blissful ignorance. That's when the email hit my inbox like a bullet. Organizational change action required. Inside, just 5 words: we're making you redundant. No preamble. No call from HR. No thank you for 17 years of flawless reports, midnight server patches, or eating crow in meetings while Craig smirked like he coded a single goddamn line. Just a bullet point list of next steps, like I was being offboarded from a cruise I never agreed to board in the first place. I stared at the screen, clicked it closed, reopened it. Still the same, impersonal font, empty tone. And that smiley face Craig had the balls to post in our team Slack 30 minutes later. New beginnings. Proud of the team flexed biceps. If you're wondering what it feels like to be erased by a man who once asked how to copy-paste in Excel, imagine spending nearly 2 decades scrubbing rust off a sinking ship while your captain doodles sea monsters on the whiteboard and then fires you for getting wet. But hold up, before we get into blood, spreadsheets, and poetic revenge, if you're one of the 97% of folks who listen to these stories but haven't hit subscribe yet, now's the time. It costs you nothing, but it seriously motivates the team that crafts these chaos-drenched tales. Plus, Craig hates community building. So, bonus. Anyway, back to the apocalypse in my inbox. I didn't even feel rage at first. That came later, like the aftertaste of a burned hot pocket. What I felt was emptied out, like I'd just watched my house burn down but could still smell the dog shampoo in the air. I had poured everything into this job, not because I loved it, hell no, but because after the divorce, after Mark left with his CrossFit coach and our retirement savings, I needed something that still ran on logic. Data was clean, predictable, honest, unlike Craig. Craig was the kind of guy who called his PowerPoint presentations narratives and took half days every Friday to align his energy. He wore noise-canceling headphones to avoid conversations, but never missed a chance to loop himself into my wins. When my cost analysis tool slashed department expenses by 18% last year, he presented it at the Q2 board meeting as our innovative metrics harmonization initiative. He even got a bonus. I got a stale bagel from the break room, but I didn't leave. Not because I didn't want to, I fantasized about it all the time. Standing up mid-meeting saying, actually, Craig, those weren't your numbers. And no, your leadership style isn't inspiring. It's just lazy with a good skincare routine. But life had other plans. Divorce drained me, the mortgage was climbing, and my son needed braces, so I stayed. I endured. Until now. Now I was fired by email. With no warning, no acknowledgement. Just Craig's digital knife in my back in the cold silence of a Monday morning. I refreshed the page. Access revoked. My login credentials dead, my badge already locked out of the building. The IT guy even messaged me privately, sorry, Dana. Craig told us to pull access immediately. I don't agree with this. I didn't reply. What was there to say? Instead, I opened my laptop at home, logged into the secure backup I'd built years ago, the one only I knew about. Not out of paranoia, out of necessity. Because when you work under a guy like Craig, you don't trust the official reports. You build your own. I'd quietly maintained a shadow dashboard for internal QA, a little insurance policy. Every discrepancy, every fudged number, every consultant payment Craig claimed was strategic spend but was really just a buddy from college, logged, time-stamped, version-controlled, and encrypted. And it was all still there. Untouched, unseen, waiting. He had no idea. No idea that the system he pitched as his own was never fully transferred to his login, that certain admin-level views required a biometric two-factor tied to my personal key, that the data he built his little sandcastle of lies on had a silent observer in the shadows. Me. So I brewed a pot of coffee, poured it into my world's okayest analyst mug, and leaned back in my chair. Let the games begin. I always figured if they were going to cut me loose, it'd come with at least a 10-minute Zoom call and a bullshit sandwich. Dana, your work has been so valuable, but unfortunately we're restructuring. Cue some fake tears and maybe a $50 Amazon gift card. Instead, I got an email. 5 words. We're making you redundant. No subject line clarification. No name, just a digital slap, followed by a link labeled Separation Logistics. I clicked. Shouldn't have. It read like a toaster manual written by a sociopath. Submit all company devices by EOD. Refrain from accessing systems beyond 11 o'clock a.m. Legal has been notified. Final paycheck will be processed under statutory minimum. That was it. 17 years condensed into 4 cold bullet points. I'd seen phishing scams with more warmth. By 10:23 a.m., my badge stopped working. Not even a beep when I tried to enter the back stairwell. I stood there, holding a cup of half-melted office ice, staring at the red light like it might blink into apology. It didn't. Security came over, eyebrows tilted. Can I help you? I almost laughed. Help me? Unless you got a time machine and a spine transplant for Craig, no, buddy, you cannot help me. They asked for my laptop. I handed it over, cords and all. Still warm from this morning's reports. No ceremony, no thank you, just the silent burial of everything I had built quietly, correctly, relentlessly for nearly 2 decades. Then came the Slack message. Craig, appreciate all the hard work during this transition team, flexed biceps excited for what's next. He had to know I was still on the thread, still had Slack mobile access, still reading his digital confetti aftertaste like it wasn't a neon sign saying, I finally got rid of her. No personal message, no direct reply, just that got him flexing emoji. I stared at it for so long my screen dimmed, and that's when the numbness cracked. Something cold stirred in me. Not rage, rage was what they expected. A woman in her 40s screaming in HR, slamming doors, writing long Facebook posts about toxic leadership. No, this was different. Sharper, quieter, like a scalpel behind the curtain. I opened a folder on my home desktop labeled Archive B. Inside were backups, years of backups, not company secrets, nothing illegal, just receipts. Like the dashboard Craig had insisted was too messy for execs. The one I'd cleaned, curated, made bulletproof, and kept my own QA instance of. Hidden in plain sight, tucked behind a two-step login they never noticed. It contained the real numbers, the ones Craig hadn't shown. The ones that painted a less flattering picture of his cost optimizations and vendor pivots. The ones I'd triple-checked, time-stamped, and quietly mirrored every quarter. At the time, I'd told myself it was just smart practice. Now I saw it for what it was, the truth, gift-wrapped for vengeance. And then came the cherry on top. I got a calendar invite from HR titled Exit Interview Prep Optional. Optional. Craig didn't even have the guts to attend it. Left it to someone from Talent Ops who once sent a company-wide poll asking if smiling more could boost Q4 morale. By 2:15 p.m., my inbox was gone. My work profile on the intranet replaced by a 404-page. By 2:45, my name was missing from the org chart. By 3 o'clock, Craig was already posting about bold leadership decisions on LinkedIn. Got 212 likes. I closed my laptop. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I sat on my couch, stared out the window at the gas station across the street, and let the silence wrap around me like a body bag. 17 years gone in 6 hours. But while they buried me like a broken fax machine, they forgot to check if I was still breathing. They told me to let it go. Lori from procurement called the next morning, voice all soft and broken like someone had died. Maybe someone had. Dana, honey, don't let this eat you alive. You gave them your best years. Walk away with your dignity. My cousin texted, corporate's a meat grinder. Don't get chewed up. Come visit. We'll get drunk and scream at old game shows. Even my son, bless his sweet teenage indifference, muttered from behind his gaming headset, kinda sounds like that job sucked anyway. I smiled at all of them. Eyed through my teeth, said I'd delete the work emails and focus on healing. But healing wasn't what I felt. Healing wasn't what stirred me awake at 3:12 a.m., heart beating like a trapped wasp, mind chewing on numbers like they were cud. What I felt was unfinished, like I'd just been thrown out of a movie 20 minutes before the climax, so I did what I always did when the world made no sense. I went to the numbers. I fired up my personal laptop and logged into the old mirror system I'd built years back, a sandboxed QA environment with root-level access, designed during a week-long stretch of insomnia and boredom. Not officially sanctioned, not technically illegal, just unadvertised. The real-time dashboards flickered to life like they were glad to see me again. I cross-referenced Craig's last 2 quarterly decks, the ones he'd given to the board, with the raw data pulled from ops, billing, and logistics. And almost immediately, I felt my stomach drop like an elevator cable just snapped. Inflated KPIs, vendor names that didn't match approved contracts, revenue smoothing that reeked of desperation. It wasn't just creative formatting, it was fiction in a suit. On slide 12 of his Q3 deck, he claimed a 12% increase in client retention uplift. My actual report showed a 4.2% drop. Slide 17 showed vendor savings of $240K. I traced the numbers back to a contract with Agile Synergy Solutions that Craig had approved solo, a markup of 180% over the previous vendor. I double-checked, triple-checked. Every number screamed fraud dressed as finesse. That's when I remembered the invisible thread. A tool I'd built so long ago, almost forgot it existed. The admin-level analytics panel tucked behind a dummy URL requiring my biometric key. Back then, it was just a quality check system, a way to see the real guts of our ops before Craig massaged them for upper management. But now, it was a Rosetta Stone. I opened it. It was all still there, untouched, pure. Every log, every timestamp, every deviation between what Craig showed the board and what the system actually reported. I could disappear quietly, change my LinkedIn status to exploring new opportunities, spend afternoons baking banana bread and pretending I didn't care, post vague, cryptic quotes about new chapters and rising like a phoenix. Or I could light a match. There was a tickle at the base of my skull, part instinct, part vindication. I'd been loyal, too loyal. I'd covered his mistakes, reworked his last-minute decks, even kept my mouth shut when he tried to cut holiday pay for the temp staff. And this was how he repaid me? No, not like this. Not after 17 years of being the quiet one, the safe pair of hands, the invisible gear that made the machine hum while Craig took bows on center stage. I stared at the blinking cursor in a new email draft. The recipient field was empty. The subject line read, Q3 dashboard full access link. I hovered, closed the laptop. Not yet, not until I had every piece in place. The truth wasn't just in the numbers, it was in the silence between them. And if Craig thought he buried me under a bland exit memo, he was about to learn something beautiful and terrible. I built the foundation he stood on, and now I was taking my name off the blueprints. The clock on my kitchen stove blinked 5:47 a.m. in that smug green glow, like it knew something I didn't. I hadn't slept. Just paced. Brewed decaf I didn't drink, and stared at the wall like it might offer up a better plan than the one forming in my head. But no better plan came. Only the plan. At 6:03 I logged in. Not through the front door, they'd shut that one. I came in through the crawl space I'd built years ago, tucked under layers of admin logic and forgotten subdomains. A dev access shell left untouched because no one else ever bothered to ask what /verifyops sync did. What it did was open everything. Internal dashboards, raw data logs, daily anomaly flags, cost center overrides, API event pings. It was all there, humming like a quiet engine behind the polished reports Craig spoon-fed to the board. My credentials were still active. Probably just an oversight, but who was I to waste a good miracle? I started downloading. Not in some reckless steal everything kind of way, I wasn't looking to go out in flames. This was insurance. Precision, surgical backup, a curated folder of facts, not feelings, clean Q3 data raw KPIs side by side with Craig's version Slack audit trail showing blocked access requests, vendor payout logs. Craig accidentally misreported. I zipped the folder, encrypted it, uploaded to a locked drive, created a read-only dashboard link with restricted view permissions, just enough to expose the rot without giving anyone a chance to panic and delete evidence. Then I opened Outlook, drafted a new message. To CEO, CFO, board chair, audit committee, and every board member I'd seen on the last org chart. Subject, Q3 integrity review. I sat there for a second. No introduction. No preamble. No long goodbye. In the body, I typed 2 words, check attachments. Then I inserted the link. Attached the backup doc for context. Then I did one last thing. I scheduled the send. Delivery, today, 9:00 a.m. Same time as the quarterly board meeting Craig had been foaming at the mouth about for weeks. The one where he'd planned to unveil his Q3 miracle metrics. I'd watched him rehearse it once through the glass of the executive lounge, gesturing with his hands like he was conducting a damn orchestra. He had no idea that the notes he was playing came from my sheet music. And in 1 hour, the board was going to hear what the symphony really sounded like, screeching violins and all. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the screen. It felt nothing like revenge porn. No rush, no dopamine blast, just stillness. Clinical, cold, like loading a gun you built yourself. Knowing exactly what caliber it fires, what sound it makes, and where it's pointed. I didn't even flinch when my access expired at 6:58 a.m. I just closed the laptop, sipped the now cold coffee, and whispered to no one in particular, let the numbers speak. Jasmine had only been there 3 months, but her heels already echoed with purpose down the glass hallways. While Craig flexed his buzzwords and leaned into strategic alignment, Jasmine sat in meetings with the expression of a woman measuring coffins. She didn't smile much, didn't post #blessed to be here on LinkedIn. She read everything, asked surgical questions. The kind that made men like Craig suddenly forget what operational synergy meant. I'd noticed her the few times our paths crossed, once at the elevator, another during a budgeting stand-up, where she politely annihilated a forecast Craig had inflated by rounding favorable. He'd blushed like a child caught cheating with a calculator. Weeks before my exit, Jasmine had requested direct access to my raw dashboards. Not through Craig, not through a filtered deck, direct. She CC'd me on the request and included words like audit continuity and baseline clarity. I'd started drafting a response when Craig intercepted it and replied with that special brand of vague arrogance. No need to burden Dana. My team has the latest data snapshots for review. That was the moment I knew he feared her. So when my scheduled email fired into the boardroom that morning, 8:59 a.m. on the dot, it landed like a pin in a cathedral. Check attachments. Jasmine saw it first. Mid-sip of her black coffee, reviewing her own deck when the Outlook ping vibrated under her palm. She clicked, leaned in, and didn't move for a solid 30 seconds. The link opened in a private browser tab. No password needed, just a time-triggered authentication keyed to my archived credentials. And there it was. The dashboard Craig had buried for over a year. The real dashboard. Her eyes scanned line by line, burn rate variances, vendor bloat, churn misclassification, HR shadow payments labeled transitional equity. It read like a quiet confession. She didn't call attention to it, didn't blow a whistle. Jasmine wasn't that kind of executive. Instead, she turned her head slowly, locked eyes with the CEO across the polished obsidian table, and gave the tiniest nod, just enough to say, "Look at this." He paused mid-slide. Craig was still talking, still flexing graphs, his voice high with that faux humility tone. We're proud of these numbers, truly a team effort. The CEO picked up his iPad. Jasmine whispered something, brief and low. Craig kept talking, but his tempo shifted, like he felt the temperature drop and didn't know why. I wasn't in the room, but I imagine it like a slow leak in a pressurized cabin. Nothing explosive, just a tightening, a shared inhale. Meanwhile, I sat in my car in the Target parking lot, idling with an old Taylor Swift song playing low. My inbox was empty. My phone was quiet, but something buzzed deep in my chest. It wasn't victory. Not yet. It was the feeling of being seen, not applauded, not hugged, just recognized. Jasmine hadn't said my name. She didn't have to. By opening that link, by showing it to the one man Craig couldn't spin, she'd answered a question I didn't know I'd been asking for years. Was I ever going to matter to someone who mattered? In that moment, quietly, without ceremony, the answer was yes. A woman I barely knew had read my work, trusted it, used it. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel invisible. The boardroom was temperature-controlled, light-drenched, and always smelled faintly of eucalyptus. It was the kind of room where consequences usually came in the form of pivot decks and polite suggestions. But not today. Today, the walls watched. Craig was in rare form, laser pointer in hand, pacing like a man who'd just cracked the code to corporate salvation. His voice hit that syrupy register he reserved for high-stakes spin, and as you'll see on slide 19, our churn rate continues to decline due to proactive client engagement, special thanks to the ops team. A bold lie, considering he'd laid off half of ops last month. The CEO sat quietly, flipping through the provided deck. Jasmine, arms crossed, remained still. On her tablet, Dana's dashboard was open in full view, crosstabs, filters, audit trail logs glowing like coals. She didn't even glance at Craig. He reached slide 23. Vendor spend. You'll notice the yo-wide drop in consulting costs. We've consolidated 3 contracts into one efficiency-first provider model. That's when Jasmine cleared her throat, just once. Soft, surgical, Craig faltered. His clicker hand trembled. The CEO turned to her. Something to add? She nodded. Actually, yes. We received updated internal data this morning. Clean dashboards, version log, they differ. Significantly, silence fell like a guillotine. Craig chuckled. A thin, papery sound? Ah, well, I'm sure we can reconcile those later. Sometimes legacy systems don't capture the nuance of transitional vendor routing. Jasmine tapped twice. The room's shared display flickered, not to Craig's deck. To mine, a clean UI, split screen. On the left, Craig's metrics. On the right, mine, reality versus illusion. Inflated KPIs. Churn rates misrepresented by over 9%. Revenue recognition timelines manipulated to make cash flow appear stable. One graph showed a 6% dip in customer lifetime value. Craig's version had marked it as a 4% rise. And the consultant contracts? The merged efficiency-first model turned out to be 3 separate shell vendors, all billed under different LLCs, all tracing back to a firm run by Craig's former roommate. Jasmine clicked open the payment trail. Time-stamped approvals. No oversight signatures. All solo-authorized, all within 90 seconds of each other. The audit committee chair leaned forward. Craig cared to explain why these vendor payments were flagged by the internal dashboard but not disclosed in the board packet? Craig stammered. I wasn't aware Dana's tools were still operational. They weren't compliant with our current reporting standards. She was let go, you'll remember, for Jasmine cut him off. Actually, was the one who requested her access weeks ago. You blocked it, said it was redundant. The CEO raised an eyebrow. Why block transparency, Craig? Look, this is all out of context. Dana had a tendency to over-engineer. Her dashboards were notoriously noisy. That's why I centralized reporting in the first place. Jasmine pulled up a log entry. Metadata created, 2018 last modified, 5 days ago owner. Dana H. accessed only by Dana. No board exposure integrity checks passed irrefutable. Immutable. The CEO leaned back. Noisy? Seems surgical to me. Craig's face began to collapse inward. The room turned predator silent. Across town, I sat by the cafe window, stirring cinnamon into a latte. I hadn't paid enough attention to order decaf. I didn't care. I watched the world move, people walking dogs, late buses, a guy fighting with a parking meter. My phone lit up once. News alert about some nonsense in DC, but nothing from the office. And that was the victory. No blowback, no chaos, just the quiet hum of truth finally being louder than spin. I took a sip and let the heat settle behind my teeth. It was the first time in weeks I'd smiled without forcing it. Craig was unraveling, and the numbers, my numbers, were singing. Craig's mask didn't just slip, it shattered. By the time the boardroom lights dimmed back to neutral, his voice had climbed a full octave, and the sweat above his lip had turned from a glisten to a sheen. His carefully rehearsed talking points dissolved into corporate word salad, but the man still had one move left. Desperation. That afternoon, less than 2 hours after the dashboard revelation, my phone lit up with an email from a generic legal inbox. The subject line, notice of potential breach, immediate attention required. I read it in the back booth of a Vietnamese place off 4th, between spoonfuls of PH letter 1 EDF. The letterhead was formal, but the body stunk of Craig. It has come to our attention that former employee Dana H. may have accessed confidential internal systems without authorization and distributed proprietary data in violation of Employment Policy 3.1AO. Craig. He was trying to flip the story. Make me the breach. Make me the noise. Turn what was righteous into rogue. I didn't panic. I didn't even put down my spoon. I forwarded the email to my personal attorney. Well, technically my divorce attorney, but Linda's a beast in heels and doesn't blink around cowards with letterhead. Then I opened my folder labeled Access Logs Verified. Everything I had pulled, reviewed, and exported had been done while my credentials were still fully active. Before revocation, before they scrubbed me from the intranet. The timestamps were clear. My access was above board. The data hadn't been hacked, it had been seen. I wasn't rogue, I was meticulous. Meanwhile, Jasmine was already playing chess while Craig was still flinging checkers at the wall. In a follow-up board session that afternoon, when Craig tried to further inflate his security concerns, Jasmine calmly, methodically, and publicly pointed out that she had personally requested access to those same dashboards weeks prior. I was denied, she said flatly, with no justification beyond redundant reporting risk. She clicked a button on her iPad and showed the email thread, Craig's block in all its smug, time-stamped glory. The one where he told her not to worry her pretty little head about internal QA. That one didn't age well. The audit committee chair asked one question. Craig, you aware these dashboards contained financial discrepancies at the time of your denial? Craig said nothing, just swallowed. Jasmine continued, if I had been granted access to Dana's reporting earlier, these issues would have been caught prior to Q3 presentation. Translation, the deception wasn't just about the data. It was about intent. Craig went silent, not out of humility, out of calculation. The boardroom air turned glacial. Across town, I sat on a park bench, laptop tucked away, just breathing. Bracing, sure. I'd watched enough corporate smear jobs to know this is where the villain bites back. Maybe Craig would leak stories. Maybe he'd try to frame it as a disgruntled ex-employee vendetta. Maybe he'd call in some favor from legal to write up a scare brief with lots of bolded clauses. But I wasn't who I used to be. I wasn't the quiet, loyal workhorse praying for scraps of praise. I was the architect of truth, and the building was still standing. I felt steady, not giddy, not vindictive, just anchored. Like for the first time in years, the ground beneath me wasn't moving. Craig could scream breach all he wanted, but I had built my escape on facts. And his empire? Turns out it was made of PowerPoint slides and hubris. Craig didn't walk out of the boardroom so much as he was evaporated from it. One of the legal advisors leaned in, whispered something to the CEO, and seconds later the room was temporarily adjourned for closed discussion. The polite translation? Craig, get out. He stood slowly, gripping his leather folio like it might protect him from the truth. No eye contact, no witty exit line. Just the stiff-legged shuffle of a man who'd run out of PowerPoints and plausible deniability. The door clicked shut behind him. Inside, silence. On the record, off the script. Outside, Craig sat alone on the hallway bench, the same one interns used when they waited for badge photos. A fitting full circle. Meanwhile, I was walking the perimeter of a quiet lake trail, earbuds in but no music playing. Just the sound of gravel under my sneakers and the tiny tap of raindrops starting to flirt with the canopy. Then a buzz in my coat pocket, LinkedIn. Jasmine, I owe you lunch, 6 words. Casual on the surface, but in corporate dialect. That's a standing ovation. I stared at the screen longer than I care to admit, not because I didn't know what to say back, but because I didn't need to say anything. For 17 years, I built integrity in silence while others collected bonuses for noise. Now, the silence was speaking for me. Still, doubt crept in like a draft under a locked door. I knew how this worked. I'd seen men like Craig survive worse. Boardrooms don't run on justice, they run on optics. And Craig was a shapeshifter. He could sob, beg, reposition himself as a misunderstood visionary, pitch some story about misaligned incentives or growing pains in post-COVID analytics culture. They might slap his wrist, issue a statement, shuffle some titles around, and let the headlines fade. I could already see the PR release. We are committed to data transparency moving forward, God. What if they let him stay? What if after everything, after all the numbers, timestamps, evidence, and quiet rage, I still ended up being the woman who overreacted? I slowed my steps, looked out across the lake. It was so still it looked fake, like a postcard, or a dream you wake up from just as the good part starts. For one long minute I stood there, drowning in a fear I didn't dare name. Not because I couldn't handle disappointment, I'd swallowed years of it like vitamins, but because deep down I needed this to mean something, not just for me, for every invisible person who ever built a legacy someone else wore like a rented tux. I tucked my phone back in my coat, kept walking. Whatever they decided in that room, I had done my part. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't hoping to be saved. I was just hoping they didn't lie to themselves again. When the boardroom doors opened again, Craig stepped back in like a man trying to remember the last moment he still had power. His hair looked flatter, his posture deflated. He was clutching a manila folder that didn't belong to him like he thought holding paper might make him look useful again. The CEO didn't ask him to sit, didn't gesture, didn't blink. Just looked him in the eye and said, cold and plain, you are finished here. No dramatic pause, no flourish, just a verdict. Final. Legal was already drafting the paperwork. They didn't even pretend it was a negotiation. No golden parachute. No stepping down to pursue new opportunities. Just termination. Immediate, unceremonious. Craig opened his mouth to argue, but the board chair stood before he could speak. We're done here. That was the last thing anyone in that room ever heard him say. He left the building through the service exit, badge deactivated, inbox revoked, name scraped from the org chart before the elevator hit the lobby. And me? I was in my garage, barefoot on the cold concrete, folding laundry and watching the tumble of socks like they were old memories being wrung out. My phone rang. Not a number I recognized. New York area code. I answered anyway. Dana, this is Caroline Reed. I'm the chair of the board. Pause. I wanted to thank you. Another pause, but not a nervous one. A respectful one. We'd like to offer you a consulting contract. Help us clean this up, make it right. Whatever that looks like to you. It was the first time in 17 years someone asked me what right looked like. I thought about it. About stepping back into that building, into that seat, into that mess of echoes and ghosts. And then I smiled. No, thank you, I said. I think I've already done what I came to do. She didn't try to argue, just said if you ever change your mind, and hung up. I opened my email app, scrolled to the bottom, clicked remove account. The inbox went blank, like a chalkboard wiped clean after one final lesson. I stepped outside. The sun had finally broken through the clouds, warming the driveway like a benediction. I didn't feel like celebrating or weeping, I just felt done. Done carrying, fixing, patching holes other people poked. Done waiting to be noticed. Done being the gear behind the curtain. My phone buzzed again. A recruiter this time. Big firm, good salary. I didn't even read the full message. Just held down the power button until the screen went black. Not out of anger, out of freedom. I walked into the sun. No briefcase, no badge, no borrowed identity. Just me. And for the first time since forever, that was enough. You're the real MVPs of the office jungle. Thanks for watching. Smash that subscribe button, or the coffee pot might just forget your next brew.